I asked the pharmacy tech if my prescription bag had been stapled with judgment. That is all I asked. And somehow, by the end of the pickup, Dan was standing beside the blood pressure machine with the expression of a man wondering whether marriage comes with a return policy. Let me say this before anyone starts making it dramatic. I am not going to say what the prescription was. That is private, and frankly, not the point. People hear prescription and immediately act like there is a scandal. Sometimes it is just a normal adult errand under fluorescent lights with a plastic chair in the corner that looks like it has heard too much. The pharmacy had texted me that my prescription was ready. Ready, a bold word for a pharmacy, because ready can mean ready. It can also mean somewhere behind the counter, near ready, recently thought about, or waiting for one person with a badge to locate it in a bin full of identical white bags. Dan said, "This should be quick." I looked at him. He said, "Right. Sorry. That was growth. Small, but visible." There were 6 people in line. One man was coughing into his elbow with theater-level commitment. A woman ahead of us was holding a bottle of antacid and reading a birthday card, which told me immediately she was not here for speed. You cannot emotionally shop greeting cards and also move a line forward. Those are different lanes of consciousness. When it was my turn, the pharmacy tech looked up and said, "Name?" Not rude exactly, but not warm either. Just one word across the counter. Like she was tossing me a label, I gave my name. She asked for my date of birth, and I said it quietly, because I still believe in privacy, even while standing next to gummy vitamins shaped like animals with better branding than most adults. She turned around to search the pickup bins. Behind her were rows of white prescription bags, folded and stapled shut. Some were neat, some were casual. Mine had an attitude before it even reached the counter. I saw it. The top was folded unevenly, pulled too tight on one side and stapled with 2 diagonal staples. Not straight, not centered, diagonal, like the bag had been closed during a personal disagreement. She brought it over and said, "Here you go. That was the second issue. Here you go. Not thanks for waiting, not all set. Not do you have any questions for the pharmacist. Just here you go." Like she was sliding me something under a motel door. I looked at the bag, then at her. Then back at the bag. Dan whispered, "No," which was interesting because I had not said anything yet, so he saw it too. I held the bag up slightly and said, "Was this stapled with judgment?" The tech stared at me. Dan turned toward the blood pressure machine like he was considering starting a new household beside it. The tech said, "What?" I pointed to the top fold, the staple angle. "It feels pointed," she said. "It's just stapled." Just a very dangerous word. Just is how people get away with doing things badly and expecting everyone else to pretend they did not notice. I said, "I understand that it is stapled. I am asking whether it was stapled neutrally." The man behind me coughed again, but this time it had commentary in it. The tech said, "We staple all the bags." "I'm not questioning the institution of stapling," I said. "I'm questioning this particular performance." Dan said, "Karen, the medicine is ready. Let's go." I said, "Dan, if someone handed you a bag folded like it had already made assumptions about you, would you simply leave?" "Yes," he said, "and that is why some standards never recover." The tech said, "It's for privacy." Now, I respect privacy, I do. But privacy does not need to look annoyed. Curtains provide privacy. They do not need to fling themselves shut. I said, "Privacy is fine. Presentation is the issue." She said, "Do you want me to rebag it?" Helpful words. Bad delivery. It was the kind of offer people make when they want you to feel ridiculous for accepting it. So I accepted it. "Yes," I said, "if you can do it without the diagonal energy." The woman behind me shifted her weight. I turned slightly and said, "This will take 1 second." She said, "No, it won't, uncalled for." The tech took a new bag, moved the little pharmacy packet into it, folded the top, and stapled it once. Straight. Better. Then she added a second staple right next to it. "Too close." I said, "Why 2?" She looked at me slowly. "So it stays closed. But now it looks tense." Dan made a sound like a tire losing hope. The tech said, "Do you want 1 staple?" "I want the staple count to match the needs of the bag," I said, "not your frustration." A teenager sitting near the waiting area laughed into his sleeve. I looked over. He immediately became fascinated by a display of reading glasses, because that is what people do now. They laugh, then pretend a rack of bifocals called them personally. The tech said, "Do you have a question for the pharmacist? Not about the medication? Then what is the issue?" "The bag." She repeated it. "The bag?" "Yes." I will admit when she said it like that, it sounded smaller than it was. But that is what happens when other people summarize your standards in a tone meant to shrink them. Tell me in the comments, if someone handed you a prescription bag sealed like it had an opinion, would you say something or carry that energy home? The pharmacist came over, calm walk, professional face, the face of a person who has separated customers from expired coupons and survived. He said, "How can I help?" The text said, "She has concerns about the staples." Very narrow summary. I said, "I have concerns about how the bag was closed." Dan put one hand on the counter and stared down like maybe the counter would absorb him. The pharmacist looked at the bag, then at me, then back at the bag. He said, "We staple the bags so the contents stay private and secure." "I understand that," I said. "I'm not anti-staple." The tech looked away. I noticed. I continued, because clearly the situation needed context. The first bag was folded sharply and stapled diagonally. This one is technically straighter, but the second staple is crowding the first one. It looks irritated. The pharmacist paused. The pharmacy went quiet in sections. First the counter, then the vitamin aisle, then, somehow, the greeting cards. Dan whispered, "Please stop making the vitamins listen." I ignored that, because the vitamins were not the issue. The pharmacist said, "There was no judgment intended." "That may be true," I said, "but a customer should not have to guess whether her prescription bag is mad at her." The tech said, "I didn't even know what was in it." "That actually makes the judgment feel more general." Dan said, "No, it does not." I turned to him. "Please don't minimize anonymous judgment." The pharmacist asked, "Would you like it unstapled?" "Absolutely not. That was a trap with a white coat. If I said yes, suddenly I was against privacy. If I said no, I accepted hostile metal." I said, "I would like it stapled in a way that does not feel like punctuation." The tech closed her eyes for half a second. I saw it. Third bag. At that point, the woman behind me said, "Oh my God." I said, "I can hear you." She said, "Good." Again, unnecessary. The tech took a fresh bag. She put the packet inside. She folded the top evenly. One staple. Centered, clean, balanced, respectful. I looked at it and said, "See? That is better." The tech said, "Great." "A little too fast," I said. The "great" had some edge on it, but I am choosing to leave that alone. Dan said, "Thank you." Not to me. To the ceiling. If you think a bag can look mad, hit the like button. Apparently this is a lonely belief system, but I know I'm not the only one. The pharmacist said, "Anything else?" "No," I said. "The bag is now in a healthier place." The tech handed it to me. I accepted it. Then she said next, before I had fully moved. Next, a word like a broom. I stopped. Dan reached for a cart that was not there. He just needed something to hold. I said, "Just so you know, saying next before the previous customer has cleared the counter can feel dismissive." The pharmacist's face changed, not angry, more like he had just watched the first fire go out and then smelled smoke again. The tech said, "There are people waiting." "And I am leaving," I said. "I'm just giving closure feedback." The woman behind me said, "I am begging you to leave without feedback." I turned around. "That is also feedback," she said. "Use it." Dan put his hand gently on my shoulder and said, "We are done." I was almost done. "No," he said. "The bag is done. The staples are done. The word next is done. We are done. Marriage is compromise." So I walked away while still having several valid points available. Outside, Dan walked slightly ahead of me, which is what he does when he wants distance, but still wants credit for staying married. I said I handled that calmly. He stopped near the automatic doors. "You made a pharmacy employee rebag your prescription 3 times because of staple emotion." "Twice," I said. "The third bag was successful." "That is not better." I looked down at the bag, center staple, clean fold, no diagonal hostility. It is objectively better. It is a paper bag. Paper can participate. He walked to the car without responding. At home, I placed the bag on the counter. It looked fine, more than fine. The fold held. The staple sat in the center like it understood boundaries. The whole kitchen felt calmer. That is the part people skip. Standards are uncomfortable while you are enforcing them, but afterward, everyone enjoys the peace. Later, I posted in the neighborhood chat. Question: if a pharmacy bag is stapled diagonally and handed to you with no warmth, is it privacy or judgment? Brian replied. Please tell me this is hypothetical, Rebecca wrote. What did Dan do? I wrote, Dan sided with diagonal stapling. Marcy sent a photo of her dog wearing a tiny pharmacist coat. I'm not asking where she gets these outfits anymore. I'm asking whether the dog has a license, Brian wrote. You cannot accuse staples of judgment, I replied. Objects can carry tone, Rebecca wrote. Did you hold up the pharmacy line? I wrote, the line existed before my standards entered it. Exactly. The next morning I thought about calling the pharmacy. I did not. I drafted a note instead. Staple neutrality in sensitive pickup environments. Will I send it? Probably not. But sometimes a note is where society's unfinished business waits. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because next time I will explain why I asked a bank teller if anything else was a question or a dismissal. As for the pharmacy, I stand by what I asked. I did not reveal private information. I did not attack the tech. I did not insult the pharmacist. I simply refused to accept a prescription bag that looked like it had already judged me in the parking lot. And after 2 attempts, the bag was better. The staple was centered. The fold calmed down. Dan can sigh. The woman with the antacid can tell her whole family about me. The teenager can keep pretending the reading glasses were fascinating, but I know what I saw. A crooked staple. A sharp fold. A next that arrived too early. If everyone else wants to carry that kind of energy home in silence, that is their choice. I chose closure, centered, stapled, and finally neutral. My side of the story, obviously.